Ready.
And so the week begins. Here we are in Think Tech, doing Think Tech Global, doing midnight in Brussels. The only problem is I've been advised that it's not midnight, nor is it 11 o'clock, but it's 10 o'clock p.m. on the same day. And here we are with Gauri Khandekar of Global Relations Forum, who joins us at 10 o'clock from Brussels. Welcome again to the show, Gauri.
Thank you very much, Jay. Such a pleasure, always.
Lovely to have you on. So we're going to call this, let's see, was a Gauri around the globe, because you seem to be more of a globetrotter now than you have been before, and that's great. It's a metric of some kind that you do all this travel.
All Think Tech luck.
So I want to begin with asking you how you get your news about Europe. You know, I look at the BBC, I look at Google, but where do you look? And The Economist. Oh, I'm sorry to admit that. But where do you get your news?
Oh my God, in so many different places, actually. So many times, well, you know, as a think tank, I must say, we do our own research quite a bit. So I have one of my junior researchers, he does a whole report on what's happening in Europe and European foreign policy. Then another of my really great juniors does another report on Europe and Asia. So we do kind of an everyday monitoring, a daily monitoring report. So that keeps us abreast with what's happening. But, you know, our sources are so different. I mean, it goes from, of course, The Economist, but Wall Street Journal and Financial Times to, you know, the European Commission official news site, European dailies like European Voice or EU Observer. And our Asia news comes from really all across Asia. And then I keep on seeing BBC, but also Twitter. Twitter is great. And of course, I hate to admit it, but also Daily Mail to see the bad direction in which everything is going.
So it sounds like you get a good bit of it from the internet, eh?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. The internet is main medium, basically.
You know,
I don't get, I'm not ashamed to admit it, but I don't get any print media at home, except from the occasional Economist that I buy.
Yeah. You know, we have only the one daily here, the Star Advertiser, and it's the only print press. And more people are going to the internet, one source or another, for their source of local news, even though the Star Advertiser is a local paper, or at least it's you know, focused on local. But I think you know, while we watch, news is becoming global. News is all on the internet, and very you know, reliable news is on the internet too. And in fact, it's not so much that you choose it, you know, as a matter of choice, but you have no choice. You have to go to the internet. You have to find reliable global sources. Anyway, the other thing I wanted to ask you about in a preliminary way is you've been traveling a lot. You know, the last time we were to talk, you had just come in from India, and now shortly after this show, you'll be going back to India. It sounds like you're rotating to India every 2 weeks or so. Tell us about that. Is it something you need to do, want to do? Why are you doing that?
Well, basically, I'm working a bit also for the EU delegation to India. And the EU delegation is doing a really great thing in trying to bring the two sides think tanks together. So I'm a facilitator for that really great initiative, because I know both sides so well by now. And there are quite few people that actually do know both sides so well. So I guess they got me on board for this, and I think it's, you know, and it's I think it's a great opportunity. Sorry,
yeah, we have static on the line.
Hello.
Yeah, but let me just say that it comes to me that successful business people, successful people in the world today, one is they get the news per our earlier conversation. Two is they speak. They speak, or they write. They express themselves. You certainly do that. And the next one is they travel for business, what have you, and they are out and about. And I guess that's also the mark of the successful executive. If you look here in Hawaii, you see that the guys who are running the operation do a lot of travel, and I suppose that's so all over the world. It's a metric, but it's also it's a requirement. In other words, you learn. What do they say? Travel is broadening, no? And there are some things, although you can do on the internet, but there are some things you really must do in person, and you must travel for that. Sounds like you're finding your niche. You're finding your stride, Gauri.
Thank you, Jay. Very kind of you. I completely agree with what you say is that when you travel, you learn the most. And I have no doubts about that. I mean, I learn more when I meet people from different countries, in different countries, than I would learn from, like, opening a website, basically. And also you get to see perceptions, so how people perceive things. And that's not really possible, I think, with print or internet media. So you really get to learn a lot. And whenever I travel, and that I really feel privileged in order to be able to meet such important people from think tanks, knowledgeable community, is that they're just so learned, and every time I'm so impressed that they know so much and that they're willing to share their information with me. So I really am very happy about that.
Yeah.
Actually, last evening, if I may, I was invited for dinner over by the Swedish ambassador, and he had a good friend over from the US. Well, he's an Indian professor at Berkeley, a very knowledgeable professor, Professor Shiver. And they had so much to talk, and just meeting him, I got to learn so much about my own country, which I would never have.
See, sometimes other people remind you of your own country.
Yes, a lot of times.
Well, let's talk about some of the news we were going to talk about last time, and I think the thing that's prominent on my side is what is going on in Israel. There were a series of stabbings, I mean many stabbings, on the street by young Arabs who would do a kind of sewing machine stab on people, stabbing them multiple times in places that are medically known to be fatal places, trying to kill them. And the Israelis, a lot of them started getting permits for guns, and the Israeli police force stepped it up, and the army stepped it up, and before you know it, there were a lot of deaths. The Jews were getting killed at a rate of half a dozen a day at random, and the Arabs who attacked them were getting killed regularly too because they were meeting resistance. Very tragic because it tends to undermine the entire society there, which is a multifaceted society. I mean, a lot of Arabs in Israel are citizens and have jobs and careers and do well. And you only hear from the protest side of the equation, but in fact, if you take the protest out for a minute, it's a successful, multifaceted state, multiracial state. So this is extremely destructive, and it is. There's talk that it was supported by Hamas. I think that's been proven, and then it was also talk that it was supported by ISIS. So what we have is, all of that violence from across the border coming directly into Israel on a personal, on the street where you live kind of way. And I'm sure that the Israelis are very stoic about this, but they must be very concerned about what is happening. What is the reaction in Europe to all of that, Gauri?
In Europe, there's growing kind of feeling that the whole violence that's happening in this region is because of the settlements, and that's a growing concern. So what the Europeans are basically asking for is to have more reconciliation. Although Israeli security is quite important for Europe itself. There are cultural links. It's almost and another EU member state, basically. Also, if you see the trade ties that are there between Europe and Israel, but this is the attacks are for something that's condemned strongly. But again, there's really growing sentiment that these settlements have been the main source behind resentment that's growing. And most European governments have been um, going in that trend. One of the EU officials even suggested that Israel and Palestine should build a kind of a confederation.
Yeah.
But I think the most important bit that got in the news is Netanyahu's comments about Hitler and the Muftis, basically.
Yeah. Well, I read that John Kerry went there a few days ago, trying to broker some kind of, what do you want to call it, a solution. And there was a partial solution yesterday where, let me think, Jordan and Israel agreed to monitor the traffic at Al-Aqsa Mosque, which is just above the Wailing Wall in Jerusalem, in order to make sure there were no, inappropriate visits, I guess, however you define that. And so if that was a real source of the violence, a real vector of the violence, I'm not convinced it was, then that issue may be handled now. But, up till now, every day there have been street stabbings, and I'm not sure that they have diminished. One thing that I don't think the U.S. gets, or for that matter, Europe gets, is the horror of a stranger walking past you on the street and turning as soon as you have passed him, and then he stabs you. This is a horrible experience, and it makes you look over your shoulder, makes you afraid to go out. It slows the economy down, slows everything down out of unmitigated fear. And can you imagine that happening in New York City or Boston or Washington or San Francisco? There would be such an uproar. The reaction would be enormous because we take for granted, I think, some of our personal security in the cities of the U.S. anyway. And I'm sure, they say that Europe is actually a safer place than the U.S. Fewer guns, fewer personal attacks, fewer, physical robberies and all that. But I'm sure that if that happened in Brussels or Amsterdam or London or Paris, there would be an outrage of the same kind that we would see in the U.S. I don't think people realize how totally fearsome it is to have a city where people can turn on you on the street.
I agree with you to a certain extent, but just a few months back, there was, and this is kind of becoming a trend. Somebody in Graz, it's a city in Austria, drove a car through a busy shopping street, and there were people killed, But just Europe's reaction has been to deal with it with a lot of calm, I think, even after the Charlie Hebdo attacks. There is growing resentment in Europe about violence, of course. But the way the EU deals with it as an international actor is so much more different than the US. I think the US is more affirmative when it comes to security in Israel, let's say. Europeans tend to be much more divided. Even if they unitedly condemn the violence, there is very little that the EU as an actor can do, because, the EU is really quite separate from its member states. So it's not as strong a foreign policy actor as, for example, the UK or Germany or France. So in that way, the EU is quite weak. What it can do is really rally behind the multilateral platform and try to push through things at the UN level, or, as it has done very well in the past, to block certain terrorist organizations or financial or the funding mechanisms for terrorism. So that is where the EU is best at, I think. But I think the US is a much stronger, much more visible actor in terms of security in that region than honestly the EU is.
Yeah.
But again, there are two things that are happening in Europe. It's one, the reaction to terrorist attack is quite limited. people are not reacting as strongly as they would with so much outrage, that you would see elsewhere. Um, Charlie Hebdo was a case in point, and that was really big. That I know people here who've been so calm and so composed, and they were angry. So for me, it was shocking to see that. The other way in which they've been dealing with it is basically a growing resentment to all that Islam in a way. So also the migrants are mainly seen as Islamic.
Yeah, the
I
migrants are
also
part of this somehow, not necessarily directly, but maybe indirectly, because they create a sense of diminished security. People worry and wonder. They don't know, what will happen. You mentioned before the show began that there's been, over time, a drift to the right, to conservative governments, to
yes.
conservative politicians in Europe, all over Europe. And there's a connection between that and the migrant issue, no?
Yes, completely. Well, basically, it's also a bit related, well, quite a bit related to the economy, because Europe is still stuck in quite a rut still, it's not yet as vibrant as it was, and, growth does not come so easy here anymore. Also because it's a developed economy. So for that reason, you will never see the kind of dynamic growth that is so obvious in emerging markets like China or India, or even the new Southeast Asian countries. So in that sense, Europe is stagnating. The economic crisis made it even worse. So if Europe was struggling a bit before, and there were hidden challenges then, even then, um, this has become a terrible situation now.
Yeah, and I think people
Europe,
get raw on the nerves. I mentioned to you that there was something on the BBC this morning, because, I always look at the BBC before we call you, Gauri. I want to be at least somewhat informed. And there was a piece on the BBC about an attack by a lone attacker on an army base in Belgium, probably close to where you are right now. And the BBC made a big thing of it, although there was really, from the article, not too much to be concerned about. So it was an individual. They could not link him up with any terrorist organization. The army was able to, control him very quickly. I'm not sure if there were casualties, but nobody was killed anyway. But what I sense out of this is the press, the people, the army are a little rough at the edge, a little raw on this kind of thing, because they half expect there will be some, expression of violence, and they're kind of on a heightened sense of alert. Do you see that?
yes, I do. I do see it. Yesterday, when I was walking my dog, like I told you, at the park right in front of my house, I saw two army personnel with sniffer dogs. And it's such a calm neighborhood. Well, basically, I have to say it's a bit strategic location because it's right next to the EU institutions. But even 2 years ago, I would never have thought anybody would want to bomb the EU institutions, because I mean, the EU always does so much good across the world. It's the largest aid donor, it's the biggest market, it talks about human rights. So why would anybody think about bombing the EU?
Well,
But you're right, there is a kind of sense of insecurity that's growing on the ground. You're completely right when you say it's also a bit linked to the migrants issues, even psychologically.
yeah.
And when you see the migrants coming in, and EU governments basically under international pressure to accept more and more, uh, the people see their governments is doing nothing. So they tend to support stronger opinions. And that's been also the trend towards the more conservative, the more far right, or towards the right of the spectrum.
We're going to take a short break, Gauri. That's Gauri Khandekar, Global Relations Forum, and her headquarters, if you will, is in Brussels. That's why we call this show Midnight in Brussels, even though it's only 10:30 there now. Maybe we have to change the name of the show, Gauri. And tonight, tonight for her, Gauri Round the Globe. We'll be right back after this short break.
Hi, I'm your host on Think Tech Asia, Bill Sharp. I look forward to you joining us each Monday between 4 and 5 o'clock when we film right here in our studio in downtown Honolulu. The show, Think Tech Asia, focuses on contemporary events in Asia. And by Asia, we mean anything from Hawaii, south to Australia and New Zealand, west to Pakistan, and as far north as the Russian Far East. Clearly, this is one of the most economically dynamic centers of the world, and we bring you up to date on what's going on in a whole host of countries in this very vital region. We look forward to seeing you. Aloha.
Okay, we're back. We're here enjoying ourselves on a Monday morning with Gauri Khandekar, Global Relations Forum, who is in Brussels, of course. And we're calling this, almost midnight in Brussels because it's only 10:30 p.m. We're talking about, what did I write down? Gauri around the globe, always looking for onomatopoeia. So Gauri, the Russians have, under Putin, they have taken a more and more aggressive stance on more and more issues. It feels like the Cold War. And now the latest thing was I saw that they put a military satellite up there, and they don't want to tell you why or where. And the U.S. has complained about it, but they are saying, don't worry about it. This is our business, not yours. And you get the feel that they're in less and less a cooperative mode, more and more a bellicose mode. The matter in Ukraine is not resolved. They're fomenting, violence in Syria. What is it with them, if I could ask?
Well, I am of a different opinion, more of an Asian opinion, let's say. Russia is doing what needed to be done in Syria to a certain extent. Of course, they're bombing haywire, but somebody has to take care of the ISIS situation. And European governments don't seem able to do that. The US has no appetite for any more war in the Middle East, and they really want to concentrate on the pivot to Asia, which is understandable. But you cannot leave a smoldering Middle East, and you cannot let ISIS grow, which is what was happening. Now, European governments have been supplying arms and ammunition to those that were seen as opposers of the Assad regime, right?
Yeah.
But what the Russians complained is that these were just mercenaries, and you never knew where the weapons transferred and to which hands they went to. So this morning, yesterday, I saw a very funny cartoon, which was a bit linked to also the migrants issues, and it shows Germany giving arms to Syria, to the rebels, and then the arms pointing in the direction behind the migrants who all rushing to Germany. So it was import export, and that was the title, which is so true, So
Yeah.
so finally, somebody is doing something about it. And I think secretly, most European governments also appreciate that Russia has taken a stance. Now, psychologically, Europe still suffers from a huge fear of Russia, a reinvigorated Russia. And when you see Russia deploying all its state-of-the-art missiles in Syria, that gets a lot of coverage here. So European governments have been observing what Russia has been deploying, how Russia is, taking up a more global role, and why is it so, and is this a resurgent Russia? So it's kind of torn governments apart of what do we do? Is Russia good? Is it doing good in the Middle East and bringing security to Europe, or should we fear Russia? Could this happen in Belarus maybe, or more so in Ukraine?
Yeah.
So they don't know how to deal with it now. So Europe is in a bit of a loss. But in terms of the trust, that's been historic. Historically, there's no trust between Europe and Russia.
Yeah.
But today, you'll see that Russia and Europe have planned to jointly explore the dark side of the moon. So maybe that space exploration will again bring both sides a bit more closer.
Well, I wish we could put some energy into solving the problem in Syria. It's like it's a proxy war already. And you have multiple parties, not necessarily coordinated, all shooting in one direction or another in Syria. And ISIS seems unaffected. I saw some photographs on the internet yesterday of ISIS having graduation ceremonies for its leadership training. And they looked very crisp with their uniforms, all identical uniforms. And, it's a crisp military organization. This is scary. Before, if you thought they were, just a bunch of hooligans, which they are, now you look at them and they look pretty organized. So, I mean, we haven't had much of an effect. I wonder what people in Europe think about Obama and his policy in Syria. If you say that the Russians are doing something we should have done, I wonder what they think about us. Certainly, we are doing a lot of sort of third-party military activity with bombing and assistance and transportation and weapons and all this, but because of political considerations, he doesn't put boots on the ground. Everything up to that, but he doesn't put boots on the ground.
Yeah.
And I'll query whether that is effective. What are we doing, and how do you get? I mean, this goes on. Sunrise, sunset, day after day, month after month. No resolution. A lot of people being killed and displaced. It's awful. What's the solution, and what do people think about the solution? What do they think about the U.S. in finding a solution?
Well, I have to say that the Iraq war still remains in the memories, but not only in the memories. I mean, it's still alive here.
Yeah.
Everybody brings up the failures of the Iraq war now, and it's blamed now basically for what's happening in Syria at the moment. A failed state is seen as a breeding ground for ISIS, basically. And if you remember, Europe was so divided about the Iraq war. You have half of Europe that supported the US, and if you read UK mail, you will see that Tony Blair is almost on trial, and he accepts that the Iraq war was a mistake, and he just went along with it. So then, and that's headlines. That was yesterday's headlines in the news. So that is still strong. That image is still strong. Now with Afghanistan, there's been such war fatigue in Europe, and governments have been criticized, and they just don't want to send, their personnel abroad. That is something that is, of course, seen as a no-go. So Europe would not take part in any kind of military action that would involve boots on the ground, like the US. Europe does want to see, Europe has traditionally always let the US take the lead. And in a new European global strategy that was just released some time ago, the main recommendation basically boiled down to we have to follow the US, the US lead. And there's nothing new about it. Europe has always done that. Today, I think in Syria, there is less of an imperative or less of a kind of enthusiasm that there was before for Afghanistan, but also less so about Iraq. But now there are just different challenges that Europe is facing, and the US as well, politically, but also in terms of the economy. And ISIS as an organization, you would see that it's a little more organized than Al-Qaeda, but it's still quite disparate. I mean, they don't have the training or the trained soldiers that were there during Al-Qaeda, because the Al-Qaeda trained soldiers were training for a longer time in Pakistan, in the Afghan mountains. You have a lot of new recruits for ISIS. Russian action has been effective to the extent that it's been more targeted, and I keep on seeing reports of big leaders that have been killed. Even the main leader's convoy was hit, but he escaped somehow once again. But it's if the Europeans and the Americans did not stop Russia, it was for a certain reason, because they're allowing Russia to do their work for them, which something they probably would not have wanted to do, I think.
Yeah. Let's take a short break, Gauri. It's Gauri Khandekar, Global Relations Forum. She joins us from Brussels, and now it's 10:30 there, roughly. It's Gauri Round the Globe. And when we come back, we're going to talk about Gauri's adventures in India and, what that means in terms of the changing, the transformation of the world, if you don't mind, Gauri. And you're seeing it in at least two places. We'll be right back.
Hi, my name's Hillary Weinberg. I'm the host of The Whole Gamut on Think Tech Hawaii. See us live every Tuesday at 1 p.m. or on our YouTube channel to hear us talk about world affairs from Hawaii and beyond. See you then.
Aloha, this is Reg Baker and I am the host of Business in Hawaii. We talk about positive stories of businesses in Hawaii, how they have been successful, and how they have overcome some of the obstacles that a lot of us encounter when we try to have a business here. And believe it or not, there are a number of positive stories here, and we want to talk to all of you. So we broadcast live every Thursday at 2 o'clock, and it rebroadcasts again on Olelo Channel 54. So I sure hope to see you next time. Please tune in on Thursdays at 2 o'clock. Thank you.
Okay, we're back with Gauri Khandekar, Global Relations Forum. She's in Brussels. We call this almost midnight in Brussels because of the time difference. Gauri Round the Globe. So, we've been talking about the Europeans and how they react to the Middle East and to the migrant situation, which is sort of an extension of the Middle East. So much to discuss there. But it occurs to me that you've been doing Global Relations Forum in India. You've been sort of connecting up. We have what I would say, I think you will agree, we have a global transformation going on because Europe is in a transformation, a population, migrant transformation and more, okay? And certainly the Middle East is in a transformation. It's coming apart. And finally, India, looking at the Middle East from the other side. Not yet, all that much affected by it, but I think the smart analysts will see that India must be very aware of what's going on in the Middle East because soon enough it will be affected. And you said during the break that you actually have a program coming up on this. Tell us about it.
Yes. So it's, I think we should be having you as well on our team because you think in the right way. So we're going to be doing an event at the end of November. So I go again to India then for that event. And it's precisely on that topic, Middle East, energy security, and what it means for Europe and India and what they can do together.
Yeah.
So this is a very important issue. Now, I have spoken, of course, on Europe and how it's a weak actor, especially now because Europe's main challenge at the moment is the migrants issue. And that seems to be really, Europe seems to be toiling with it. India's challenge is that it's traditionally not been an important foreign policy act. I mean, foreign policy is not the biggest imperative for India. It's been non-aligned. So this has this policy of not aligning with anybody, not to have any external intervention, and it puts in a lot of importance on state sovereignty. So when you have these two kind of very similar actors and the whole region between them smoldering, what do you get? It's utter chaos because two big actors are not doing much. India has even more need to basically act in the Middle East and make sure that the Middle East is stable because it hosts the largest Indian diaspora in the world. The Gulf Cooperation Council, the GCC, which is an organization of the Gulf countries only, is India's largest trading partner as an organization, which is huge. India's remittances are the largest from the Middle East, so foreign remittances, which means the money that comes in. And the Middle East is also a source of, is the largest source of Indian energy. And Indian foreign policy has been criticized quite a bit by Indian researchers, by a lot of people, and even our own staff, for not being an effective actor in the Middle East, not being an important actor. India somehow manages to have a very good balance I must say, Israel is its strategic ally in a way, not a treaty ally, but a strategic partner. Trade is great with Israel. Israel is the third largest arms exporter to India. Cooperation on counterterrorism is really strong between Israel and India. But at the same time, India has since the beginning really campaigned for a two-state solution. Then India manages to have excellent ties with the Shia and the Sunni states. But when it comes to really talking about stability, India remains so much absent. And that's what our event is going to talk about basically. Can India drop its non-aligned stance? Is non-alignment changing? How would India really seek to take up a role in the Middle East? Because it directly impacts India's energy resources, its income, basically its own diaspora. And as you grow as a global actor, the impact that happens upon your own domestic issues, on your economy, on your growth is huge. So that becomes a challenge.
So where's Mr. Modi on this? Has he made statements about changing the policy from non-involvement to greater involvement?
I don't think any prime minister since Nehru has made any such kind of statements, honestly, except for Indira Gandhi when she took up the Bangladesh case when East Pakistan was liberated, which is now today Bangladesh. And India had stepped in because precisely of the migrant issue. You know, there were millions of migrants in India, refugees actually. And it was a strategic security dilemma for India. Mr. Modi has been so visible on the global scene. He's been to the Middle East, he's talked about peace and development and trade, but there's no mention about India being a security provider for the Middle East.
Well, it's risky on both ends. It's risky domestically because people aren't going to like the external risks. And the external risks are huge. You know, you have Pakistan right there. Pakistan is infiltrated, and that's a threat. Remember Mumbai.
Yes.
So, you know, I guess there must be a certain level of concern that if you wake the sleeping dragon, you know, if you get out of the non-alignment policy and into, you know, being aligned, being involved, before you know it, you're going to have the same problems that, you know, the other side of the Middle East has.
Of course. Yeah, no, I completely agree. I mean, non-alignment has really worked best for India. It's the most pragmatic foreign policy that India could have ever conceived. Basically, during the Cold War, it ensured India's development. So it wasn't part of any of the camps. And so it pursued its own path of development without any involvement in wars that it could not afford, basically. If some people know this, but I don't think it's very well known by the majority of the people, that India has participated in both the world wars with a lot of people and a lot of resources, because then it was part of Great Britain. Since then, India has not wanted to have any external involvement in any wars.
Mm-hmm.
And today, I think India's biggest threat, of course, comes from its neighborhood, so Pakistan, but also Afghanistan growingly, Nepal, Bangladesh. And if you see the map of India, it's surrounded by sea on two sides, the triangle, the Indian diamond. And the sea is a big threat. So while India is the largest resident navy in the Indian Ocean, so it patrols all that vast area, it's also 2/3 of its military is on its border between China and Pakistan. So how can you really afford to have your troops elsewhere? But that said, India is one of the largest provider of peacekeeping forces to the UN.
Well, but what about a nuclear power? I recall, was it Obama or Bush? But at some point in the last few years, the U.S. Made India into nuclear power. It gave him technology, gave India technology, and India took that tech. Has it actually become a nuclear power?
Well, India has had nuclear weapons since many decades.
Mm-hmm.
And that was developed in India basically.
Mm-hmm.
What the US did was to kind of move the nuclear suppliers group to basically allow this group to supply uranium to India and technology to enable India uh, to really expand its use of nuclear energy for peaceful purposes. And that has enabled India to sign accords with many countries, including Finland, Russia, France, Canada, Australia. The US agreement, I think, is still in limbo in a way, but they've not yet started sales, I believe, to India.
Yeah. Well, I think people underestimate, the role of India. Maybe India underestimates the role of India, in the world that we are transforming to. You have the Europe, you have the Middle East, you have India, and then you have China and the East. And if you look at it as a geographical matter, India is very important in the world to come. A great democracy, a great country with all kinds of achievements. Granted, there are problems, there are challenges in every democracy, but India is a major player. And I guess I would ask you last question, Gauri, where do you think it's going to go? What role do you think it's going to play, say, in 10 years?
Oh, Jay, I'm so happy to hear that you think such nice things about India. India in 10 years. It's part of my study at the moment to see how non-alignment is changing. And one of the biggest aspects that I identify is that while during the previous years, during the Nehruvian times, India shunned major actors under non-alignment, it is now actively seeking out the big powers. It's in what is called a multipolar society, so you have many poles of important actors, and now India is actively seeking to work with them. So India would become a global power in that sense, but not on the same lines as the West has. So it's creating a more multilateral system, a more inclusive system, something along the BRICS, which is challenging the old Western world order. But I think it's basically going to lead a path much different to any other previous global powers.
Yeah.
Does that mean more intervention? I really doubt that, but it does mean more action in terms of development, aid, international stability from both the economic and the security point of view, but security through the UN. So when I say security, it would mean more human security and more of a say in global matters. So I think that's where India would go.
Yeah, it seems to me anyway, as a faraway observer, that India is a kinder and gentler, more moderate country, a stabilizing force in the region. It doesn't have, aspirations for territory the way China does. It doesn't have aggressive intentions on its borders. It just wants to lead a reasonable life kind of thing. It's very good karma is what it is. That's my impression. But I think India will play a huge role going forward. And further to that, Gauri, I think you will play a huge role in examining that and analyzing and shaping it and interpreting it for us. So you just happen to be in a great spot at the perfect time. And we will follow you wherever you go in examining these issues.
You're too kind, Jay. Thank you so much. I'm so grateful to be on your show.
Thank you. Gauri Khandekar, Global Relations Forum, right at the point of transformation in Europe and in India and Asia. Midnight in Brussels, or almost midnight, and we're talking about Gauri around the globe. Thank you so much, Gauri.
Thank you. My pleasure.
Aloha.